doing now feels easy. But you know, you learned everything in the bars. You know, you had to please an audience sight unseen. You had hours upon hours to work on your craft. You got used to being ignored, so that didn't bother you too much. And it was just a place where you could just learn your business. And I enjoyed the social aspect of it. I wasn't a drinker at the time, but you know, you get 150. Once we got pretty good at it, you get 150 people a night, 3 nights a week. That means you made $150 a night. There were 5 of you, so you made $30 a night. You made $90 a week, and anybody that couldn't live on $90 a week in 1968 just didn't know what they were doing. So life was pretty good. And I just remember, you know, it felt free as could be, and then I had my ambition, and I wanted to do more than that, but it was an incredible place to learn your craft. And these days, I think where things happen so fast, a lot of musicians may not get the time to do that. In those days, not only did things happen incredibly slow, if at all, but you were millions of miles from anywhere anyone would ever see you or you would be discovered. An hour and a half out of New York was like Timbuktu. And so we worked for years in that part of that neck of the woods. And nothing ever happened. You know, nothing ever happened. We drew thousands of people to shows, nothing. I mean, a group that was drawing 5,000 people to a concert with no record album wouldn't last 3 seconds, you know, right now out there before somebody came and saw.
What do you think's changed about that? Why is that?
Just temporary times, you know, everything's sped up, you know, the internet. You know, when I started, there was no cell phones, no entertainment media, no e-television or TNT, none of those things existed. There was very little coverage of you in daily newspapers. You know, rock was still ghettoized, and it was just a completely different universe where things happened at a much slower pace, and you could go like we did, 8, 9, 10 years doing what you do at a very high level with nobody of import ever really seeing you.
So when 1972 came around, you I'm assuming, had decided sometime before that you wanted to change the direction of what you were doing. Because when you walked into John Hammond's office, the tape you laid down that day, that's not bar band stuff.
Right.
So what change happened that got you there?
It's a little foggy, but I seem to remember at some point I felt I looked around and I said, well, there's guys that can sing as well as me and much better. I was a really good guitar player, and I made my living as a guitarist for a long, long time. But when I listened to the radio, well, there's guys out there that play guitar better than me. So I started to concentrate on my songwriting, which was very difficult to present in bar band format. That you had to tailor what you were doing in a bar, even if it was original music, to being immediately accessible. And the degree of complexity of the lyrics on Greetings from Asbury Park would have simply made people twice as drunk as they were. If I started to play that stuff early in the bars, you know. So, but I knew that was where I wanted to go. So, I just, for the first time in my life, maybe, I stopped working in a band, and I started to concentrate on this kind of writing, with the hope that I would be able to get in and see somebody, and I knew if I did, I would have one shot. I'd have to make an impression with just my voice, my guitar, the song I was singing, and that's what I set out to do.
So a lot of your great contemporaries, like Declan McManus, who's Elvis Costello, or Robert Zimmerman, who's Dylan, or the multiple personalities of Tom Waits, these guys created artistic personas that had a lot of sort of mystery and artifice around it. But you didn't do that. You were Bruce Springsteen when you walked into Hammond's office, the same guy you were growing up in Freehold. Were you ever tempted to create a persona or take a stage name or anything like that, or did you kind of know early on that, was it just natural that authenticity was your artistic identity?
Well, I did do that. It's been so mysterious, nobody's caught on. You can't help but create a persona the minute you walk out on stage. I didn't change my name because it just didn't feel like the right thing for me, you know. But you do build a completely constructed persona that, of course, is tied into your true inner self and it comes out of your roots and your background. But on another level, it is a creation. I built something on some of the voices of my past and the voices of my family, and I created what people see on stage, which was very different from my young self.
So Dylan hated being called the voice of his generation, and you've often been kind of put in that voice of category, a lot like voice of America, voice of New Jersey, voice of the working class. How comfortable are you with when people talk about you and your career that way?
Well, nobody likes that stuff because it pins you in, you know.
Right.
On the other hand, you know, I suppose it's kind of flattering, but it does feel like the minute you're the voice of anything, there's an obligation. Most artists run from obligation. I mean, that was the whole point. You know, it's one of those things you're on the fence about.
I'm thinking particularly this moment in the book, late in the book, on 9/11, when you're down near the shore and some guy drives by and his car rolls down the window and yells out, "We need you, Bruce." And you said you sort of knew what he meant, and you know, not long after that, you worked on The Rising. You know, this sort of goes to politics too. Does the artist have a responsibility to engage in that way, or do you feel like you do?
Well, you're in a lifelong conversation, and that's just the facts. You can't get away from that once you throw your hat into the ring, and you do end up with an obligation to your audience, whether it's just to do your best work, or whether you believe that it goes beyond that into some sort of social obligations. So, to me, what it meant on that particular day, the guy was saying I played a certain role in his life. And I believe, you know, you do contextualize experience. You do assist people in finding their way through the world, which is why I write music in the first place, to help me find my way through the world. And so basically, I think he was just saying, man, we need somebody to help us make sense out of all this, because it was impossible. And I mean, I don't know if I did that, but we were in a neighborhood that at the time was very hard hit by the events of the day, and it was just something that I ended up writing about. But you always have a little ambivalence about that, because once again, it's sort of
cost you some relationship or have an effect on your relationship with some of your fans. How do you weigh that, or do you weigh that?
I guess I always figured that the folks that are real fans of my music will understand where I'm coming from. And, on any given day, there's certain things that are more important than a rock and roll show. So. That's just the way that I measure it when those kinds of moments come up.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you about Clarence Clemens. You wrote about him in the book, and that he sort of represented something for your audience. I wonder if you could talk about his role in your life and in your band.
It was very unusual, Clarence was sort of mythic in Asbury before I ever laid eyes on him. He was playing a band called Little Melvin and the Invaders. And, it was an all-black band that played in the black clubs surrounding Asbury Park. And Gary Talent happened to play bass in that band with him. And I was always looking for a rock and roll saxophonist. I could never find one. I didn't want a jazz player. I wanted a guy who was truly a rhythm and blues rock and roll saxophonist. And they were just very hard to come by. So Gary kept saying, there's this guy, Clarence Clemens. Finally, one night he came into the club we were playing in, and he sat in with us, and he just carried it all with him. He carried an enormous amount of, for me, just rock history with him. He had a sound that was a force of nature. It's just an amazing sound that came out of the saxophone. If you stood next to him particularly, you'd hear it before it went into the microphone. And it was incredible then, just acoustically, So there was an immediate connection. And it's hard to explain, but our relationship over the next 40 years or so, it was just very deep. Clarence was a combination of something that was so real you had to deal with it. He was also a figment of my imagination and of my dreams. And we created a duo that was just unique. And some of it was very self-consciously constructed, but you couldn't make it up. It had to, the roots of it and the heart of it had to be there for you to polish it and present it, He was just, I don't know how to go beyond it. A brother I never had, and I think we played very unique role in each other's lives, As I say in the book, that I was this sort of skinny, insecure white kid with a lot of R&B dreams, I imagined myself singing like Wilson Pickett. Imagined, I say. And Clarence kind of gave me a lot of confidence and was always had my back when it was not so easy being, as I say in the book, kind of weird and skinny and on the outside. And I think I did something similar for him, where it was not so easy being big and black and in America in the early 70s or late 60s. And we came together and we just sort of became this one thing. It was one of the greatest relationships of my life. So.
talk about, but I want to ask about one other John Landau, especially if you could start by describing the night you guys met.
Yeah, I was in Boston. It was an ice cold Boston winter night. I was playing a club called Joe's Place. And there was about 7 or 8 people in the place. And it was me, it was the early incarnation of the E Street Band. And all I remember was there was nobody in the joint. Actually, the thing I remember about the night was Danny Federici had a huge white bandage on the front of his head. We'd come back from Texas, we all bought cowboy hats. Danny had an accident and smashed his head into the wheel of his car, but his cowboy hat actually saved him from disfigurement. So he was at the organ, and I don't know if we played a set or we were getting ready to play, but I went outside and there was a review of our second album taped to the window, trying to lure in some breathing customers. And I was standing out there and I had my jacket off and I was reading Mr. Landau's review, and up on my left came Dave Marsh and John Landau. They came in. I didn't know either of them. They came out to see the band, and all I remember was John saying, "Hey, what do you think? What do you think of the review?" I said, "That's pretty good." And that was kind of the beginning of our relationship. And then we just had a musical friendship for quite a while, where we'd visit each other and play records and talk music. It was a big night, though. It was a big night in my life.
He remained, or it became an even more important part of your career as you moved forward, coming as producer and managing.
Yeah.
There are 2 records I want to ask you about that